Morning, everyone. Today's session is Learning Outcome 3, and we're doing it on business law today. My name is Shazia Khan, and this is Learning Outcome 3. Before I go into Learning Outcome 3, I just want to give you an overview of what we did in the last Learning Outcome, which was Learning Outcome 2, which was to illustrate the potential impact of the law on businesses. In that learning outcome, we looked at the impact of law. We looked at the element of the impact on law on businesses, how it impacted it. We also looked at how businesses would be affected by a number of legislation, such as things like the health and safety, environmental health, employment law, taxes. We went then on to look at what contract law was and how that impacted onto a business. We also looked at formation of contracts. We then went on to look at the elements of a contract and looked at the terms of a contract and why they are so important for a business. We then went on to look at competition law, and we looked at the Competition Act 1998 and also the anti-competitive agreements and also abuse of dominant market position. We went on to look at data protection and GDPR and why that's so important for elements of, protecting individuals' personal data. We went on to look at the tort of negligence, and we also looked at elements of consumer protection and why that's so important for individuals and businesses. We also went on to look at health and safety laws and why they are so important for any sort of business and product liability. We also went on to look at the duties of employers and the duties of employees as well, and why they are so important. We looked at the employment contract and also looked at employers' rights and obligations, and looked at dismissal, how to manage dismissal cases, how to manage cases of redundancy, and finally, we looked at how to manage cases of discrimination and health and safety within the workplace. So we looked at elements of that within Learning Outcome 2. Now we're going to go on to Learning Outcome 3. So Learning Outcome 3 is on the board now, if you can all see that. So Learning Outcome 3, we're looking at elements of examining the formation of different types of business organizations. Here we're going to look at the indicative content is we're going to look at the nature and formation of a company. We're going to look at unincorporated versus incorporated legal structures. We're going to look at different types of business organization and legal structures. We're also going to look at things like sole trader partnership and registered company. We'll also be looking at elements of the classification of companies, the digital role of a company's house, and also starting up a business organization and registration requirements. We're going to look at the management of the company. So, for example, appointment of directors, company secretary, auditor, and the role of shareholders. We'll also look at the application of company law and the informing different types of business organization and companies and raising capital and liquidation. We'll also looking at the history and understanding of relevant case law, indicating the importance of both common law and legislation and why they were important, common law and business formation today. So the key terminology today is looking at the nature and the formation of a company. So it's really important to identify that company's legal entity is separate from its owners. And this is called incorporation. And the formation process involves registering the company with government agencies like Companies House, and filling in the legal documents such as company's name, registered address, and the detail at least of one director and the shareholder. And when you do this, this creates a limited liability structure meaning that the owner's own personal assets are protected by the company's debts. So if anything happens in that situation, their personal assets are protected, and the company is then liable under that, which protects the individual's assets. Um, then we're going to look at what is the meaning of a company. So, like we said, a company is a legal entity that represents an association of legal persons with a specific shared objective, such as earning a profit or the benefit of society. And its complex business structure with higher set of administrative cost because of extra reporting requirements and higher legal obligations. So this is the kind of definition that we'll go through. We're going to look at unincorporated versus incorporated legal structures. So, unincorporated legal structure is a group of individuals who are personally liable for the organization debts and obligation. Whereas when we look at an incorporated structure is a separate legal entity that can enter into contracts and own property in its own name and whose members generally have limited personal liability. This means unincorporated organizations are simpler and cheaper to start, while incorporated ones offer protection for personal assets of those running them. So there is advantages and disadvantages of both, which we'll be going through in more detail. Unincorporated, firstly, unincorporated legal structures are, like we said, groups of people who come together for a common purpose without registering as a separate legal entity, such as sole proprietorship or an unincorporated association. Key features of the include things like lack of separate legal identity, meaning members are personally liable for the group's debts and obligation. The key characteristics for unincorporated legal structures is there's no separate legal identity, like I mentioned. Members are personally responsible for the organisation debt and legal liabilities. It's often the simplest and cheapest, as we mentioned earlier, and it includes unincorporated association like clubs or associations. Each member is responsible, and there are advantages and disadvantages of that, having an unincorporated legal structure. The next is incorporated legal structures. Keith, are you on? No. Okay, so let's just go back to that. In incorporated legal structures are organizations with a separate legal entity from their members, meaning they own property, enter contracts, and employ people in their own name. The structure provides limited liability, protecting individuals from organization debts and liability. And common examples include companies, limited partnerships. The organization is for incorporated legal structures treated as a distinct legal person. And then obviously the organization can act in its own right, such as entering into its contracts. It is legally recognized as a corporate body with its own personality. It's also the organization can act in its own right, like we said. So that's incorporated legal structures. So now we can look at different types of business organization and legal structures, such as sole trader, partnership, and registered company. So these are the main types of organizational structures, each having its own legal structure, its own liability, its own setup and how it's set up, and its own tax and its own profits as well. So we'll go through each one. So like I mentioned, there are three main types. We've got sole proprietorship or sole trader, partnership, and companies. So sole trader, the first one, this is an individual who runs their own business, but and is self-employed. So as a sole trader, you are a sole owner, making all the business decisions. So that person, makes all the business decisions, runs the business, and keeps all the profits after the tax. But you're also personally liable for the business's debts and losses. Um, Sole traders often rely on their own savings and business loans. This is the simplest business structure, and you can register with the HMRC and pay tax through a self-assessment return. There's no legal difference between you and the business, meaning you're personally responsible for all the debts. So here in the sole trader, your personal assets such as your home can be at risk if your business incurs debts that you could not pay. So, there are advantages and disadvantages of this. The next one is partnership. And partnership is a business relationship where two or more people or organizations agree to collaborate to achieve a shared goal, typically to make a profit. This can range from a formal business structure, such as a legal partnership between two or more individuals, to a broader agreement between organizations to work together on a specific project or initiative. And key aspects of formal business partnership include profits and losses, our shared roles and responsibility, and how debts are handled. In the UK, there are different types of partnerships, things like general partnerships, limited partnerships, and limited liability partnerships, each with specific rules on liability and operation. Partners generally have unlimited liability for business debts, meaning their personal assets can be used to pay off business debts. And for partnerships, they fall into three categories. They have ordinary or traditional partnerships, limited partnerships, limited liability partnerships with LLPs, registered company, so limited registered company. A limited company is a business that is separate legal entity from its owners whose limited liability shared or are guaranteed to register. Your limited company with Companies House, they need to make sure they, after registering the company, must file annual accounts and confirmation statements and pay incorporation tax on its profits. And it's privately managed and owned by shareholders and run by the directors. The company must pay corporation tax on its profits and may need to register for VAT if its turnover is above the threshold. Limited liability partnership. The limited liability partnership is a business structure that combines the flexibility of a traditional partnership and with the liability protection of a corporation. Each partner is not personally responsible for the debts, action, or negligence of any other parties, and their personal assets are protected from business liabilities. The LLP is a legal entity separate from its member, allowing to own property and enter contracts on its own. Classification of companies. Companies are classed by their legal structure, so sole proprietorship, partnership, by their businesses and their sizes. And the development has led to the creation of many types of companies. Companies are classified based on their liability and the control they have. So classification of companies. So you have companies on based on the basis of liabilities, companies on the basis of members, companies on the basis of control, and you'll go through each one. So companies on the basis of liabilities, companies limited by shares, companies limited by guarantee, and unlimited companies. Companies on the basis of members is one person companies, private companies, and public companies. Companies on the basis of control is holding and subsidiary companies and associate companies. So now we're going to look at the digital role of Companies House or role equivalent. So Companies House is digital role is to be modern, digital first organization that uses technology to improve the accuracy and accessibility of company information, thereby enhancing corporate transparency and combating economic crime. This includes the emphasis on high quality, reliable data, new powers to remove and query inaccurate information, and automated data via validation. They will also look at identity verification and improving the customer service. And the main duties of the Companies House is to inspect and maintain all information from LLPs and limited company and display elements of registered companies, what they should do. And all the electronic data is free and makes up the country, creates more corporate kind of information to register it. The Companies House is the main body that is used for any sort of elements of, identifying any sorts of areas of areas for any business to register their taxes or anything like that. And the whole point of it is to identify that the taxes are being dealt with properly. So Companies House will deal with that and will improve any sort of digitalization and quality of compliance as well. So the digital role of Companies House. So the UK's registered company has a strategic plan in place to make sure they um, work and establish common data standards for international collaboration, also promote greater corporate transparency. And the strategic plan has 6 goals for the future, focusing on registers, services, and people. Companies had said that it wanted to inspire and trust, adding that it would maximize the value of its information of the UK economy. Starting up a business. So to start up a business, it's really important to conduct any sort of market research first to make sure, the business is going to, profit from things as well. And also whether there's a startup venture capital to make a small business on your own. So there's some things that you need to look at, things like budget, things like marketing strategies, whether you want to be a sole trader, whether you want to be a, limited company or a partnership. And, you need to register your business and then you need to secure some funding to make sure that, you have funding to open a business and insurance to have in place as well. So the 7 factors of creating a startup business, there are 7 main factors that you need to take into consideration. Firstly, the business idea. Why is it so important? What must you, think about the business to ensure it's feasible and that you're making a profit? You must also assess the situation, um, understanding what commitments you will need to run your business will involve. A business plan is really important to have in place, including how you will generate your money. It's really important. Also, research your business, research the potential customers and competitors that you need to research, and register your business. So, choose the right business structure. Make sure you are researching. Researching is really important part of a business. And start business finances. So, decide if you need external investment or small business loan, and also get business advice. Make sure you get advice because there are services out there for mentoring. And if you want to start up a business, there are services out there that will help you, identify what kind of business and how you want to start it and any issues around finances. So the next element of it is the registration requirements for starting a business. Now, Companies House must be registered in order to have a legal requirement to start a business. You must first choose your business structure and then get a name and register it with Companies House. And things like you would get register with HMRC to ensure you're paying taxes. And, depending on the size of your business, you should be registering elements of as an employer of the business in the UK. That means, you will be on the payroll and you will be registering your business in a bank as well to open a business account. So, it's really important in the UK. The main thing is to deal with Companies House. You need to be registering everything with the Companies House to ensure that you are on top of things and you are not doing anything that's illegal. Okay, so the next slide is looking at the management of a company, and this is really important. If you want a company to run properly, you need to make sure the process is organized properly. It's the process of planning is important, and controlling the organization's activities and resources as well is really, really important that you need to take into account. So, you need to plan, you need to organize, you need to make sure that you're leading and controlling the company's members or using the company resources. You need to make sure, that you're overseeing all the functions of the organization, such as finance, operations, human resources. And, you need to make sure that you're planning and organizing everything and staffing and controlling everything, because it's up to you to maintain control over the company's actions and performance, and look at how the company is being led as well, the management roles of it. So you need to make sure that the structure is in place, and you need to identify that managers are responsible for identifying and solving problems. So you need to make sure you are doing that. So what are company directors and appointment of company directors? So company directors is typically done by shareholders, appointing of directors and via an ordinary resolution for the board of directors through the process governed by Companies House. Company directors are someone who holds an office in the company, so they make decisions on behalf of the company and liable for the company's actions. Okay, so they are appointed by shareholders, as we said. They have inherent power to appoint directors, the shareholders, usually by passing an ordinary resolution, which is a simple majority. And the board can often appoint directors to fill a vacancy and add a new member, but their power is subject to the Articles of Association, may require subsequent confirmation by the shareholders. The company-specific Articles of Association may grant powers of appointment to other bodies, such as holding company appointing directors to subsidiary. So like we said, the appointment of directors is set by law and by companies' governing documents, which is the Articles of Association. And a company shareholder, we said, can appoint the directors by companies by ordinary resolution, and also they are appointed, the board of directors can normally appoint directors as well. Appointment of directors, so executive directors are appointed using via a service agreement, which is an employment contract, and non-executive directors are typically appointed through a letter of appointment outlining the terms of the service. And this is a contract setting out the terms of appointment. And then in general, the board can decide the terms of appointment. However, the law or company's articles will take priority over the letter of appointment or service agreement if there's any contradiction. And filing requirements as an appointment must be done within 14 days. Company secretary. So the company secretary manages the company's administrative and compliance functions, assuring adherence to legal and regulatory requirements. Key duties include maintaining statutory records, organising board and shareholder meetings, and filing documents with government bodies like Companies House. They act as a central point of contact for legal matters and shareholding communications. The company secretary can be a director, but cannot be the company's auditor or be an undischarged bankrupt unless they have permission from the court. The company secretary advises, just going back to the company secretary. The company secretary advises the board on corporate law and governance, acting as a guardian of the company's compliance with both legislation and best practices, and they ensure the company's records and filings are accurate and up to date. They are responsible for maintaining all statutory books and records, such as register of directors and shareholders and the minutes of the meeting. They handle filing of annual returns and other important documents like Companies House. Company secretaries also manage legal documents like the company's certificate of incorporation and articles of association, and often act as a signatory for legal documents on behalf of the company. And the next one is we're looking at auditors in regards to a business organisation. So we have auditor, and an auditor is a dependent professional person who examines an organisation's financial records and processes to ensure any sort of accuracy, transparency, and compliance with laws and accounting standards. Their work provides assurance to stakeholders like shareholders and help reduce investor risk. While auditors specialise in viewing financial statements, they also have other accounting skills such as risk auditing or fraud auditing. So their key responsibilities are to things like compliance checks, risk assessment, evidence gathering and reporting. Qualifications: the auditor will also consider if information given to the director is consistent. Then we have the role of shareholders. So the role of shareholders are owners. These are owners of a company who provide it with capital by purchasing shares. Their primary action involves investing in the company and influencing its direction through voting on major decisions like appointing directors or changing the company's structure. They can also receive a portion of the company's profits as dividends, and their duties are set out under Companies Act 2006. Key actions is shareholders invest money in or all part of the company. They use their votes to make big picture decisions. They also, if a company is profitable and has profits to distribute, shareholders can receive dividends based on the number and value of shares. Shareholders can sell their shares to other investors, which can generate a profit if the share value was increased. And shareholders have the right to access and review the company's financial information. And shareholders can influence their powers granted to directors and in some cases influence director salaries. The role of shareholders of the Companies House. So like we said, the role of shareholders of the Companies Act is to provide capital and oversight the company rather than manage its day-to-day operation. Shareholders have key responsibilities primarily involving around voting on major decisions, appointing and removing directors, and receiving the shares of the company's profits, which are referred to as dividends. The application of company law in forming business type of business organization and companies. So there are four types of formations. So the first one is some are inexpensive to form, and some businesses, it defines the concept of incorporation. As we said, they have a legal entity. Some business owners start off using one type of business formation, so maybe a sole trader, and as they grow, they use a different type. And it enables companies to, identify various constitution and their responsibilities as well. raising capital for a business. Raising capital involves two methods. So we have equity financing, which is selling ownership stakes through investors like angel investors or venture capitalists, and debt financing, which is borrowing money through business loans, credit cards, and asset financing. So these are sources to invest in the business. So these are the elements of how these sources will contribute to the business. You can get equity financing, you can get debt financing. Other sources are things like grants and competitions, or friends and family. Raising capital. So there's different ways, as we said, there's different ways to raise capital. You could raise it through family or friends, bank loans, it could be through equity and through debt. It could be, you could get shares, you could get equity finance, which is like angel investors, venture capitalist, or crowdfunding. You can get also debt financing, bank loans, asset finance, invoicing finances, and raising revenues, or other methods of finance, as we said, through friends and family, or things like grants. Liquidation. Liquidation is a formal process of closing a company down by selling its assets to repay its debts. This process is managed by an appointment liquidator, and once all the affairs are concluded, the company is removed from the official register and ceases to exist. The type of liquidation depends on the company's financial status, and specifically whether it's solvent or insolvent. So you've got creditors voluntary liquidation, which is um, initiated by the directors and shareholders of an insolvent company. A creditor's voluntary liquidation is a voluntary process to wind up the business. This is often done to protect the directors from accusations or wrongful trading, as it demonstrates that they are acting in the creditor's best interest. Then you have compulsory liquidation, which occurs where a company's creditor applies to the court for a winding up petition to force the business into liquidation to recover debts, and the court appoints an official receiver or liquidator to handle the process. For solvent companies, so therefore insolvent companies, for solvent companies, you have Bedvar's voluntary liquidation, which is MVL, and this is where directors and shareholders of a solvent company can voluntarily choose to close the business through a member's voluntary liquidation, and this is often used when directors want to retire or move on to a new venture. Directors here must sign a declaration of solvency to confirm the company can pay its debt within 12 months. The liquidation process. So the liquidation process, firstly, is directors consult a licensed insolvency practitioner to determine the best course of action. Then the meeting is held where shareholders pass a resolution to wind up the company, and then a qualified insolvency practitioner is appointed to act as the company's liquidator. Then the company stops trading, so it ceases business to do so while insolvent um, is wrongful trading. The liquidator takes control of the company's assets, sells them, and collects the outstanding money owed to the business. And then the liquidator distributes the funds from the sales of the assets to creditors in a specific legally defined out of priority order of priority. And then once the liquidation is complete, the company's name is struck from the company's register and the business ceases to exist, which is called dissolution. And the consequences for directors is for limited company directors are generally protected from personal liability for company's debt unless they have provided a personal guarantor. For the liquidator is required to investigate the actions of the directors leading up to the insolvency. And then directors can be held personally liable for the company's debt if they are found guilty of wrongful trading. So is just continuing while they are solvent, and directors found guilty of misconduct can be disqualified from being a director up to 50 years. In some cases of insolvent liquidation, directors are prohibited from using the same or similar company name for 5 years. So, a history and understanding of relevant case law indicated the importance of both common law and legislation for the development of company law and business formation and practice. So, in the 1820s, the Industrial Revolution gathered pace, pressing for legal change to facilitate business activity. Restrictions were gradually lifted and ordinary people incorporating until the Joint Stock Companies Act 1844. It was possible through a simple registration procedure to incorporate. As the legal regime company law traces back to its origin of the Tudor times, the first companies were set up by merchant adventurers, often under royal charter, and they were obviously private act of parliament to establish canals and then railways. So company law has been going for centuries until back to the Tudor time. Today, the government is obviously there's more of a company that is structured more, and its objective is to give companies time to compete and become more effective. It's defined by the flexible framework for companies and significant recent changes. So they've got the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act 2023 and key developments: enhanced transparency, stricter rules for identifying directors, and significant controls, new register overseas entities owning UK property, and improved powers for Company House to challenge information. So it's given Companies House more powers to challenge any sort of information they think is not right. And these changes tackle economic and crime and improve the accuracy of company data. So, like you said, a new register for overseas entities that own UK property was introduced in 2022, and that is just to combat any sort of economic crime, if there is any. Um, Companies House can now query and challenge information on public record, so they have that enhanced power. It also has a new power to share data with law enforcement and regulatory bodies, which it didn't have before. It also, Companies House must use an appropriate registered office, and Companies House can change a company's address to a default if any inappropriate one is given, and take action to strike off companies that do not comply. So, they've been given new and stricter powers and swifter powers, and more severe penalties are out there for businesses, that are causing any sort of abuse of power or any sort of elements of, the law changing. So there are new responsibilities given to Company House to make measures more transparent and more accurate. So things like, as we said, all new and existing company directors, there are new responsibilities for them. People with significant control of a company, anyone who files on behalf of the company, so there are new laws in place. And the reason these laws have come in place is to make sure that, there's no crime, and everything that Company House has done. These laws came in force from March 2024 to prevent any sort of crime. And make sure that everything is dealt with properly. So, having an appropriate address, making sure you have a duty to provide a registered email address, due statements, introduction of software only filing an account. So these changes have come about to make sure, that there's no crime being committed, and more powers have been given to Companies House to address these issues. So we've finished now. These are the references for Learning Outcome 3. Just to give you a recap of what we've gone through. So we looked at Learning Outcome 3, which was to examine the formation of different types of business organizations. We looked at elements of the nature and formation of a company. We also looked at elements of identifying what is the meaning of a company, and also the difference between incorporated and in incorporated legal structures. We looked at the different types of business structures. So we looked at sole trader, partnership, and we also looked at registered company, which is a limited company. We looked at elements of limited liability partnership. We looked at classifications of companies. We also looked at the digital role of Companies House, or the role of equivalent international organisation in regards to elements of businesses. We then went on to look at starting up a business organisation and also looking at the requirements under Companies House. We also looked at the registration requirements for starting a business and also looked at the management of a company, appointment of directors, and also looked at what company secretary would deal with and what auditors would deal with. We then went on to look at the role of shareholders, why it's so important in regards to their role and what they need to do in regards to Companies House to identify any elements. We also looked at the role of shareholders under the Companies Act and what their role was to provide capital and oversight to the company rather than manage the company. We then went on to look at the application of company law informing different types of businesses. We went on to look at raising capital for businesses and why that is so important, and also looked at elements of liquidation in a business and looked at the process for liquidation process and how a company becomes dissolved towards the end. We then went on to look at the elements of directors and the changes, looked at the history of company law, and then went on to look at company law today and how changes have been given since March 2024 in regard to Companies House having more rights to do certain, deal with certain things. So we looked at, what rights they were given under the ruling of the changes. So what kind of stuff they were given. So they've been given things like, increased transparency, enhanced powers for Companies House to challenge information on public record and to share data with law enforcement and regulatory bodies. Now, these are new powers that have been brought in by the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act, and these are there to combat any sort of economic crime and improve the accuracy of company data. So these are the references for today's session, which is Learning Outcome 3. If you have any questions, so there's an article there, there's additional articles available on Moodle for you that you can go. There's an article there looking at incorporated and unincorporated structures that you can read in your own time. Any queries or questions in regards to anything in regards to today's session or any other sessions, please email learnerwork@ukvarsity.co.uk. Submission of assignment on learnerwork@ukvarsity.co.uk, and it's 2 weeks after assignment discussion. So the next session we've got the Learning Outcome 4, and then we've got the assignment discussion. All these recordings are available on Moodle for you if in your own time, and if you want to have a listen to them, please have a listen to them in your own time. Thank you for attending any sessions, today's session. If you have any questions or queries, please email learnerwork@ukvarsity.co.uk. Thank you.